Good evening, everyone. We are going to begin reading names of people who perished in the Holocaust, although some of them are names also from local families, so you may hear names and their family honored them by saying that they're just remembering them, someone who survived the Holocaust as well. If you have names and you've never previously given them to me, please, I'm happy if you want to write them down and give them to me, or I can bring you a piece of paper, I'll do that. We ask you to silence your cell phones at this time, as we are creating a memorial space to begin our evening. And one more brief announcement, if you would care to light a memorial candle, there are candles on the table in the back, and you're welcome to light a candle. Where's page 1?
The family of Michael Levy were from Nuremberg, Germany. Michael is a child survivor of the Shoah. Many of her family members were deported to Terezin, where they died. Mina Kor, Herman Kor, Solomon Kor, Margaret Wilner, Alfred Wilner, Judith Wilner, Lily Wilner, Nathan Kor, Johanna Rosenzweig, Frida Kort, Philip Wilner de Winter, Samuel de Winter, Robert de Winter, Louis Solomon de Winter, Amalia de Winter.
The family of Regina Brenner. Regina was a longtime resident of the Lehigh Valley, a survivor of the Shoah who often spoke of her and her family's experience. Joseph Scheinblum, wife of Joseph Scheinblum, Rivka Scheinblum, and Simon Scheinblum. The family of Marlene Wolf, Ella or Eleanor Beitman Danzig, and Simon Danzig. Through the family of Eva Levitt, Eva herself, a child survivor of the Shoah, taught our community through her experiences. Eugenia Ritter, Morris Ritter, and Morris Roth.
The family of Mark L. Goldstein. Mark's father survived the Mauthausen concentration camp. Maria Goldstein, Shane Del Goldstein, Moshe Goldstein. The family of Sherry Spark. Sophia Fader was murdered by the Nazis on August 1st, 1941 in Uman, Russia.
The family of Lolly Siegel. Elazar Birnbaum, Leah Birnbaum, Zedi Birnbaum, Adolf Birnbach, Leo Herbach, Marcus Herbach, Michael Herbach, and Jenny Herbach.
Tzila Heitlinger, Yehoshua Heitlinger, Yehudi Heitlinger, Eli Friedman, Regina Friedman, Rosa Friedman, Abraham Heitlinger, Cecile Heitlinger, Ibuya Heitlinger, Miriam Heitlinger, Moshe Lev Heitlinger, Shalom Heitlinger, Shlomo Dov Heitlinger, Sylvia Heitlinger, David Lipscher, Idol Lipscher, Taub Mandel, Zvi Hirsch Mandel, Ida Schwartz, Nechi Singer, and Feiga Weinberg.
Family of Harvey Hakim, all from Kavala, Greece, died in 1943 or 1944. Avram Hakim, Sahula Hakim, Elias Hakim, Mordechai Hakim, Dona Hakim, Liza Rayton, Nisim Rayton, Perla Rayton, Meshulam.
Family of Ed Posner, a survivor of the Shagai Ghetto. Max Posner, Selma Rosendorf Posner, Heinz Posner, Herman Posner, Jenny Luff Posner, Valtraud Posner, Anita Posner, Ruth Posner, Irving Hirsch, Mrs. Irving Hirsch. Manya, family of Ann Goldberg. Manya Glickman Sukarchuk, Boris Sukarchuk, Fanny Sukarchuk, Goldie Sukarchuk.
The family of Tama Tamarkin, Tama's grandmother, Judith Ginsburg, survived the Holocaust as a partisan fighter. Betzalel Ginsburg, Fagel Ginsburg, Yankol Konshansky, Tema Konshansky, Rivka Koshansky, Rasha Koshansky, and Mordechai Koshansky. The family of Lauren Rabin, these members of the Mushkat family, all died in Belarus in 1941 by Nazi bullets. Zalman Mendel Mushkat, Serele Mushkat, Avram Mushkat, Chaim Mushkat.
The family of Valeska Ziegelbaum, Valega Kamatsky, Berlin, Germany, 1890, died in 1943 in Lavtia. Emma Hoffman, Germany, 1865, died in 1945, Theresienstadt. Bracha Strusberg, Romania, died unknown in Ukraine. Rizy Strusberg, Romania, Ukraine. Huma Strusberg, Romania, Ukraine. Bure Strusberg, Romania, Ukraine. The family of Rebecca Silver. Chandel Miller, Lowe's, Poland, and died in Auschwitz. Cyrilla Miller from Lowe's, Poland, and died in Auschwitz.
Members of the Glantz family: Iron Friedman Breuer, William Breuer, Eliza Breuer, Francie Jakubowicz, Joseph Jakubowicz, Blanca Klein Jakubowicz, Eva Jakubowicz, Sala Jakubowicz, Joseph Klein, Kuka Jakubowicz, Viola Weisberger Jakubowicz, Zuvi Jakubowicz, Martin Stark, Ita Berkovic Stark, Miklas Stark, Georgi Burko, Glokel Stark Mermelstein, Salome Mermelstein, Sarah Mermelstein, Edith Mermelstein, Sinka Mermelstein, Marcus Mermelstein, Yolan Mermelstein, Edith Kaya Mermelstein, Yenta Mermelstein Grinstein, Marcus Grinstein, Edith Grinstein, Shama Grinstein, Aaron Grinstein, Sizja Mermelstein, Shmuel Mermelstein, Frida Mermelstein Weiss, Bernard Weiss, Daniel Moskowitz, Sharika Moskowitz, Frida Stark Hollander, Martin Hollander, Rosa Hollander, Sander Hollander, Zawa Hollander Grinberger.
The family of Henry Luftmann. Henry's family lived in Germany. His mother survived the Shoah and is still living. Her family home in Germany is marked by a commemorative stepping stone. Flora Hamburger from Germany died in Auschwitz. Heinrich Hamburger from Germany died at Auschwitz. The family of Nicole Rosenthal, Jacob Polichuk, Clara Polichuk, Adele Polichuk, Elias Davis, Tina Davis. The family of Joe Lubel, Brandla Jonish, Rachela Witchell, Dora Gastman, Bernard Gastman, Solomon Jonish, Dina Goldman Jonish, Herschel Herman Jonish, Marlov Jonish, Burl Jonish, Fela Jonish, Shemov Jonish, and Shemov Lubelchik.
The family of Aaron Hochhauser. Aaron Hochhauser's mother, Rebecca Besso Cohen Hochhauser, has Greek family members who died in Auschwitz. Her family was from Greece and they were Romaniote Jews from Castoria and Ioannina. Annette Besso, Michael Besso, Rebecca Besso, Rose Besso Isaacs, Anna Isaacs, Avram Mikey Isaacs. The family of Faye Kuhn. Faye's mother, uncle, and 2 aunts, all siblings, managed to survive the war together through Auschwitz and Mauthausen. The family members who perished all died at Auschwitz. Jacob Stern, Fega Stern, Pinhas Fried, Leah Fried, Nathan Fried, Herschel Fried.
Members of the Glantz family: Lena Stark Glantz, Gustav Glantz, Martin Klein, Joseph Williger, Istav Vagi, Miriam Glantz, Laszlo Vagi, Jenno Glantz, Laszlo Glantz, Andor Henrik, Lajos Kalamintz, Erin Glantz Kalamintz, Peter Kalamintz, Susanna Kalamintz, Ignax Bohm, Victor Glantz, Helen Branston Glantz, Lasso Glantz, Gizzy Wiz Glantz, Magda Glantz, Caitlin Glantz, Jolyn Glantz Goldstein, Erna Goldstein, Carloy Goldstein, Pal Goldstein, Andor Friedman, Linka Glantz Friedman, Jolyn Friedman Farkas, Mixa Farkas, Ibel Farkas, Carly Farkas, Imri Farkas, Rosie Farkas, and then unknown Farkas.
Cyril Gita Kana, Avram Kana, Yosef Meir Kana, Pearl Kahana, Rivka Kana, Zero Kana, Hinda Kana, Yeshia Kana, Yitzhak Kana, all murdered in the Hunema, Slovakia, murdered in the Shoah.
Members of the Glantz family: Dezo Stark, Isidore Schwartz, Isidore Feldman, Atelka Friedman Klein, Moses Wojcicki, Miklos Wojcicki, Joseph Wojcicki, Ibolia Wojcicki, Magdi Wojcicki, Ilona Wojcicki Pfeffer, Joseph Pfeffer, Georgie Wojcicki, Veronica Nass, Maria Friedman Grunwald, Sanyaka Grunwald, Sarika Grunwald, Jenno Glotz, Felix Glotz, Bedrick Glotz, Martha Trish Feldhorn, Adolf Feldhorn, Imre Englander, Magdalena Ladany Fried, Maria Fried, Janos Fried, Margit Shavarts Wiseman, Paul Wiseman, Joseph Samuel Moskowitz, Istavon Schoenberg. Members of the Zager family: Tsipa Kramer Grin, Yosel Grin, Liba Green Legum, Israel Legum, Michael Joseph Legum, Kahan Zukbach, Aharon Bach, Beryl Bach.
Members of the Zager family: Yehuda Bach, Chaim Bach, Yanko Itzik Zuk, Mendel Shemer Zuk, Michla Zuk, Yossel Zuk, Wolf Zuk, Movsha Yudel Zuk, Chana Rachel, Margoli Zuk, Mendel Zuk, Chaya Fege Zuk, Sora Zuk, Chaikel Zuk, Chaye Rivke Mer Zuk, Gersh Zuk, Dverka Zuk, Wolf Marim Zuk, Ganesha Shapiro, Zalman Shapiro, David Shapiro, Movsha Shapiro, Minda Bela Gilelovich Shapiro, Rivka Shapiro Silberman, Chana Fege Gilovich Shapiro, Zisla Michla Shapiro, Yehuda Shapiro, and Mayor David Shapiro.
Members from the Roth and Freeman families: Perry Roth, Judy and Lau Freeman survived the Shoah and were the first Holocaust educators in our community. Perry Roth survived the Shoah, Lau Freeman survived the Shoah, Judy Freeman survived the Shoah. Daniel Fried, Cindy Schwach, Susan Roth. These names were contributed by the Brown family. Sandow Reef, murdered in the Shoah, July 28, 1942. Meyer Reef, murdered in the Shoah, 1942. Edna Reef Meisel, murdered in the Shoah, 1941.
William Berkowitz, Humane Czechoslovakia, 1905, murdered in the show. Elizabeth Solomon, Huneman, Czechoslovakia, 1932, murdered in the South, in the Shoah. Viola Solomon, Humane Czechoslovakia, 1936, murdered in the Shoah. Michaelash Solomon, Humane Czechoslovakia, 1929, murdered in the Shoah. Yuzen Solomon, Human, Czechoslovakia, 1927, murdered in the Shoah. Yehudit Klein, Humane, Czechoslovakia, 1933, murdered in the Shoah. Ferry Hirsch, Humane, Czechoslovakia, 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Anshel Schlesinger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, 1906, murdered in the Shoah. Mordechai Lando, Humane, Czechoslovakia, 1904, murdered in the Shoah. Josef Mayer, Humane, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah.
Ruzina Schwartz, Human, Czechoslovakia, 1925, murdered in the Shoah. Menahem Mendel Kahana, Humana, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah. Erzi Hirsch, Humana, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah. Ignaz Mendel, Humana, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah. Josef Fried, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1904, murdered in the Shoah. Josef Fogel, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1888, murder in the Shoah. Ladislav Yakubovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1910, murder in the Shoah. Giza Berger, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1918, murder in the Shoah. Stefan Felix, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1909, murder in the Shoah. Benjamin Gross, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1921, murdered in the Shoah. Armin Haina, Human, Czechoslovakia, 1900, murdered in the Shoah. Carmela Berkowitz, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1909, murdered in the Shoah. Lena Weinstein, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1885, murdered in the Shoah. Hermina Yakubovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1900, murdered in the Shoah. Elza Feldman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1911, murdered in the Shoah. Robert Fabry, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1905, murdered in the Shoah. Menahem Yakubovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1872, murdered in the Shoah. Lenka Yakubovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1899, murder in the Shoah.
Rosalia Berkovic, Helena Finyashova, Paula Rosenberger, Edita Middleman, Irene Middleman, Dora Middleman, Serena Middleman, Clara Middleman, Detsider Yesovovich, Ernest Josevovich, Livia Josevovich, Judia Krausova, Bozena Friedmanova, all in Honome, Czechoslovakia, and murdered in the Shoah.
Hilda Friedman, Hunena, Czechoslovakia, born 1940, murdered in the Shoah. Adolf Friedman, Hunena, Czechoslovakia, born 1938, murdered in the Shoah. Marcus Friedman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1928, murdered in the Shoah. Cecilia Friedman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1927, murdered in the Shoah. Ernest Middleman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1942, murdered in the Shoah. Magda Mittelman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1939 and murdered in the Shoah. David Middleman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1905 and murdered in the Shoah. Lenken Feingelbaum, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1940 and murdered in the Shoah. Ernest Feingenbaum, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1930 and murdered in the Shoah. David Engelman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1939 and murdered in the Shoah. Moses Engelman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1939 and murdered in the Shoah.
I just want to remind people that there are candles in the back that you can light, yahrzeit candles. And also, if you have names of your own families or people that you know who perished in the Shoah, you can certainly submit them and we'll be honored to announce their names.
Etela Veserova, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1909, murdered in the Shoah. Herman Gelb, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1924, murdered in the Shoah. Peroshka Gross, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1918, murdered in the Shoah. Josef Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1942, murdered in the Shoah. Frida Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1938, murdered in the Shoah. Zorka Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1937, murdered in the Shoah. Serena Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1933, murdered in the Shoah. Simon Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Etela Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah. Hanna Weissman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Etela Weissman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1936, murdered in the Shoah. Ephraim Weissman, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1934, murdered in the Shoah.
Magda Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1940, murdered in the Shoah. Imrich Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Benny Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1906, murdered in the Shoah. Magda Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1935, murdered in the Shoah. Ernest Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Isidor Hershkovich, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Clara Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1931, murdered in the Shoah. Margita Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1928, murdered in the Shoah. Adolf Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1927, murdered in the Shoah. Magda Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1921, murdered in the Shoah. Hermana Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1893, murdered in the Shoah. Ignác Gluck, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1896, murdered in the Shoah. And Cecilia Winkler, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1934, murdered in the Shoah.
Emanuel Weiser, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Moritz Weiser, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1938, murdered in the Shoah. Agatha Wheel, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1940, murdered in the Shoah. Marta Wheel, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1937, murdered in the Shoah. Friederike Wheel, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1907, murdered in the Shoah. Laser Schildkraut, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1919, murdered in the Shoah. Sarah Schildkraut, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1941, born in 1941, murdered in the Shoah. Immanuel Schildkraut, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born in 1910, murdered in the Shoah. Simon Schildkraut, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1914, murdered in the Shoah. Anna Weiss, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1906, murdered in the Shoah.
Gisela Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Ruzana Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1938, murdered in the Shoah. Livia Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1936, murdered in the Shoah. Isabella Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1934, murdered in the Shoah. Elzbieta Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Ezekiel Weisberger, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1902, murdered in the Shoah. Yakov Berkovich, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1941, murdered in the Shoah. Martin Berkovich, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1933, murdered in the Shoah. Herman Berkovich, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Matthias Halpert, Humane, Czechoslovakia, born 1941, murdered in the Shoah. Malvina Halpert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1938, murdered in the Shoah. Pinkas Halbert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1937, murdered in the Shoah. Gisela Halbert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1934, murdered in the Shoah. Heinrich Halbert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1932, murdered in the Shoah. Helena Halbert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1937, murdered in the Shoah. Frida Halpert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1929, murder in the Shoah. Rosina Halpert, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1928, murder in the Shoah. Geza Berger, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1918, murder in the Shoah. Ruth Bruder, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1933, murder in the Shoah. Milan Bruder, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1930, murdered in the Shoah. Marta Bruder, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1925, murdered in the Shoah. Blanca Bruder, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1893, murdered in the Shoah. Eugene Bruder, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1914, murdered in the Shoah. Hermina Gross, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1914, murdered in the Shoah. Abraham Citron, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1930, murdered in the Shoah. Leah Citron, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1928, murdered in the Shoah. Henrik Krautworth, Humana, Czechoslovakia, 1941, murdered in the Shoah. Hermana Krautworth, Humana, Czechoslovakia, murdered in the Shoah.
Ernesta Brody, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Hedviga Brody, Humana, Czechoslovakia, born 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Cecilia Baumhoft, Humene, Czechoslovakia, born 1939, murdered in the Shoah. Francesca Baumhoft, Humene, Czechoslovakia, 1914, murdered in the Shoah. Greta Baumhoft, Humene, Czechoslovakia, born 1940, murdered in the Shoah. David Landau, Humene, Czechoslovakia, born 1924, murdered in the Shoah. And Maximilian Landau, Humene, Czechoslovakia, born 1914, murdered in the Shoah.
Elsa Goldbat died in Warsaw. Emil Goldensberg, 1907, murdered in Auschwitz. Hans Israel, 1832, murdered in Gross-Rosen. Hedwig Kahn, born in 1833, murdered in Riga. Zilla Lesser, murdered in Treblinka. Eric Levi, born in 1916, murdered in Terezin. Norbert Marx, born in 1877, murdered in Lodz. Henrietta Mendel, born 1863, murdered in the Shoah. Amalia Nathan, born 1875, murdered in the Shoah. Gustav Oppenheimer, born 1881, murdered in Lodz. Regina Prinz, born 1913, murdered in Auschwitz. Otto Rosenberg, born 1868, murdered in Auschwitz. Hugo Rubin, born in 1871, murdered in Treblinka. Joseph Schorch, murdered in the Shoah. Deborah Sibler, born in 1931, murdered in the Shoah. Betty Spatz, born 1923, murdered in Auschwitz. Marta Tauber, born 1867, murdered in the Shoah. Samuel Valk, born 1876, murdered in Lodz. Bella Vilner, born in 1937, murdered in Russia. Wilhelm Wolf, born 1908, murdered in Dachau. Fritz Volk, born 1896, murdered in Majdanek. Emil Zach, born 1891, murdered in Auschwitz. Sally Zimmer, born 1928, murdered in Sobibor.
These victims of the Shoah were from Cologne, Germany. Heinrich Kleber, born in 1892, murdered in the Shoah. Ernst Cohen, born in 1872, died in Buchenwald. Henry Kuberman, born in 1923, died in Auschwitz. Karl Kosman, born in 1907, died in Auschwitz. Joanna Dahl, born in 1891, died in Chelmo. Samuel Dam, born in 1877, died in Sobibor. Gita Daniels, born in 1873, died in Auschwitz. Rudolf Dessler, born in 1881, murdered in the Shoah. Erna Diewald, born in 1902, died in Auschwitz. Helene Dahm, born in 1928, died in Auschwitz. Berta Drucker, born in 1887, died in Auschwitz. Moses Diamant, born in 1870, died in Treblinka. Babette Ernest Erber, born in 1861, died in Treblinka. Samuel Eder, born in 1888, murdered in the Shoah. Sophie Eichholz, born in 1895, murdered at Fort Nine Canas. Sophie Eichholz, born in 1895, murdered at Fort Nine Canas. Jacob Elberg, born in 1916, died in Auschwitz. Elias, born in 1869, died in Treblinka. Martha Emanuel, born in 1896, died in Auschwitz. Martha Epstein, born in 1918, died in Auschwitz. Chaim Erder, born in 1922, died in Auschwitz. Louise Ernst, born in 1893, died in Auschwitz. Gustav Fabian, born in 1870, murdered in the Shoah. Charlotte Foss, born in 1928, died in Auschwitz.
These were residents of Kolanow, Germany. Margot Blow, born 1929, murdered in the Shoah. Hans Black, born 1915, murdered in the Shoah. Alze Bloch, born 1908, murdered in the Shoah. Isabel Bloom, born 1887, murdered in the Shoah. Norbert Bloom, born 1879, murdered in the Shoah. Leo Blum, born 1928, murdered in the Shoah. Anna Blumfeld, born 1929, murdered in the Auschwitz. Anna Blumenfield, 1921, died in Auschwitz. Sophie Blumfeld, born 1919, died in Auschwitz. Rosa Blumgard, born 1883, died in Kalmono. Rosa Max Bohm, born 1922, died in Auschwitz. Frida Broman, born 1862, died in Treblinka. Fanny Brill, born 1874, died in Treblinka. Ida Bringer, born 19, died in Kelmo. No. Miro Brodo, born 19, died in Kelmo. Arthur Bruck, born 1882, died in Auschwitz. Ruth Bookboom, born 1934, died in Auschwitz. Moritz Buckholz, born 1908, died in Auschwitz. Erna Bunn, born 1921, died in Auschwitz. Margot Burkhardt, born 1919, died in Auschwitz. Selma Buxbaum, born 1881, died in Sobibor. Albert Kahn, born 1871, died in Sobibor. Louise Kahn, born 1897, died in Auschwitz. Meta Kahn, born 1899, died in Auschwitz.
These are residents of Cologne, Germany. Otto Aaron, born 1876, murdered in the Shoah. Selma Aaron, born 1883, murdered in the Shoah. Sibylla Adler, born 1870, murdered in the Shoah. Trude Adler, born 1928, murdered in the Shoah. Clara Axelrod, born 1904, murdered in the Shoah. Judith Alexander, born 1893, deported from France, murdered in the Shoah. Robert Alexander, born 1914, deported from France, murdered in the Shoah. Chaim Adderman, born 1886, murdered in the Shoah. Berter Barr, born 1881, murdered in the Shoah. Marcus Barr, born 1885, murdered in the Shoah. Ella Bach, born 1881, murdered in the Shoah. Gunter Bach, born 1926, murdered in the Shoah. Alice Bachman, born 1914, murdered in the Shoah. Kurt Bader, born 1935, murdered in the Shoah. Max Bader, murdered in the Shoah. Mina Bader, born 1898, murdered in the Shoah. Bernhard Burch, born 1903, murdered in the Shoah. Moses Beck, born 1911, murdered in the Shoah. Annie Benjamin, born 1903, murdered in the Shoah. Irma Benjamin, born 1891, deported from the Netherlands, murdered in the Shoah. Eric Beer, born 1910, died in Auschwitz, and Rosalie Billig, born 1881, died in Treblinka.
Aaron David Messing, Hechna Messing, Rivka Messing, Yoson Messing, Chava Messing, Yamish Messing, Moshe Brand, Leah Brand, Mayor Brand, Malka Brand, Aaron Benjamin Brand, Gittel Brand, Labish Brand, Pearl Brand, Shlomo Brand, Yanko Wachtel, Miriam Wachtel, Yoel Wachtel, and David Wachtel.
Family of Gary Price, Moritz Price, Laios Price, Teres Price, Silly Price, Andor Price, Romola Price, Miklos Price, Regina Schreiber, Lipot Schreiber, Jolie Schreiber, Dobie Schreiber, Zoli Schreiber, Hermione Price, Rosa Newman, Eva Newman, Eddie Newman, Judith Newman.
Aida Munchnik, born 1915, death unknown, place of death, Majdonk Camp. Katyeth Hannes, born 1890, died 1942 in Auschwitz. Anna Benice, born in 1895, died in 1942 in Terezin. Sonia Ginsburg, born in 1895, date of death unknown, place of death, Kovana Ghetto. Meryl Levine, born in 1898, died in 1945, place of death, Stutzhof. Pola Remez, born 1903, died 1942, place of death, Novgrod, Poland. Moshe Bayux, born 1923, died 1943, place of death, Kiev, USSR. Mina Friedsner, born 1914, date of death unknown, place of death, Plaszow Camp. Elsa Elsa, last name unknown, born in 1872, died in 1942 in Auschwitz. Semi Levinson, born in 1890, died in 1941. Place of death, Minsk, Belarus, USSR. Kila Gronek, born in 1927, died in 1942, Paris, France. Fruma Gordon, born in 1878, date of death unknown, in place of death, Pornery, Poland. Laszlo Kies, born in 1911, and date of death unknown, in Russia, the USSR. Henya Zarembok, born in 1931, date of death unknown, in Valina, Poland. Henya Gierson, born in 1907, died in 1942 in Lwów, Poland. Heinrich Bertisch, born in 1910, died in 1940, Stanislav, Poland. Rachel Beck, born in 1878, died in 1944 in Auschwitz. Alexander Froyend, born in 1889, died in 1942 in Auschwitz. Wilhelm Rozak, born in 1895, died in 1943 in Poland. Louis Gronek, date he was born is unknown, and he died in 1942 in Auschwitz. Bluma Epelstein, born in 1920 and died in 1945 in Kovno. Zev Gibel-Yansky, born in 1878 and died in 1942 in Novogrodek, Poland.
Our program will start in 1 minute. He's turning up the lights. I'm sorry, he's turning up the lights. Oh. Let me just put this here.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Zimmerman, and I'm privileged to serve as the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of the Lehigh Valley. Tonight on Yom HaShoah, we gather in solemn remembrance. We come together to honor the Holocaust survivors among us, to remember those we have lost, and to ensure that the legacy of the Holocaust is carried forward to the next generation. We remember the 6 million Jews who perished. We pay tribute to the courage and resilience of the survivors. And we recommit ourselves to standing against hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. On this somber occasion, we also affirm the enduring spirit of the Jewish people. We embrace our responsibility to educate future generations, and we renew our commitment to confront anti-Semitism and to stand united against all manners of intolerance. This evening's program is not only a reflection of the past, it's a call to action to the present. We are especially honored to welcome Lois Roman, trustee of the Memorial Scroll Trust, whose presence reminds us that the lessons of the Holocaust must continue to shape our lives today and in the future, so that never again is not merely a phrase, but a promise. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that the voices and memories of those who came before us endure. Unfortunately, Mayor Turk could not join us this evening, but he sent his representative, Frank Kane, whom I'd like to call up, because Frank has a proclamation to share with us. It's trial by fire. Today is Frank's first day on the job. I hope you don't mind my sharing that. Please.
Thank you, Jerry. But it's not my first day of life, and we're all here on this solemn occasion to remember Yom Hashoah. So the proclamation says, whereas today we remember the millions of innocent men, women, and children who were persecuted and murdered during the Holocaust, and whereas we honor the strength, resilience, and courage of Holocaust survivors who endured unimaginable suffering and yet rebuilt their lives with dignity and hope, and whereas survivors have shared their stories to educate future generations, ensuring that the lessons of the Holocaust are never forgotten, and that hatred, prejudice, and injustice are confronted wherever they exist, and whereas the city of Allentown joins communities around the world in commemorating Holocaust Remembrance Day, a solemn occasion to reflect and remember, and whereas the city of Allentown stands united against anti-Semitism, bigotry, and all forms of hatred, and reaffirms its commitment to building a community rooted in respect, inclusion, and understanding. Now, therefore, I, Matt Turk, Mayor of the City of Allentown, Pennsylvania, do hereby proclaim April 13th, 2026 in Allentown to be Holocaust Remembrance Day in the City of Allentown, and encourage all residents to reflect upon the lessons of the Holocaust, honor the survivors among us, and commit to building a more just and compassionate world.
I just want to take a moment before we get the full program underway to thank Bethel for welcoming us into their beautiful sanctuary. I want to thank the students who joined us earlier, who gave voice to those we are missing and honored their memory with care and dignity. A special thank you to Lois Roman for helping us reflect on our communal role through the Czech Scrolls story, from the devastation of World War II to the resilience of the diaspora. And thank you especially to Shari Spark, our Holocaust Resource Center coordinator, for creating meaningful and moving programs and for connecting us to our history so that we may remember. And thank you all for being here this evening to remember communally with us as a collective. And now I ask you to please rise for the national anthem. If you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones. Last reminder. And it's my privilege to call up Cantor Sussman. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
May be seated.
When we place the Sefer Torah back into the Aron Kodesh, we sing, Eitz Chaim hi lemachazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. We keep going, of course, but it is a tree of life to those who grab hold of it, and all of its supporters are blessed with happiness. The idea that we celebrate as a community the 613th commandment, to write a Sefer Torah. How many of you have ever filled a letter in a Sefer Torah before? At Brit Shalom, we had the privilege many years ago now, seems like a few years ago, that we actually wrote a new Sefer Torah. And boy, the celebration was amazing. Can you imagine it? We had a klezmer band, we had a chuppah, we were dancing to dedicate a Sefer Torah. What an amazing thing for a community to be able to do. And what do the Torahs see? Week in and week out. Prayers for healing, simchas, baby namings, ufrufs, the cycle of the year and celebration and dancing on Simchat Torah. Imagine what the Sefer Torahs here at Bethel have seen. The amazing souls, some of whom we remember, that danced and held those scrolls, that were called for aliyot. A Sefer Torah is one of the most precious things a Jewish community has. And they last from generation to generation to generation, and we pass them down at B'nai Mitzvah. We hold these scrolls because the word Torah means the teaching. It's from the word, if you pulled back a bow and let the arrow go loose, something that you bring into yourself. And when it goes around, what do people do as the Sefer Torah goes around? We reach out to bring its words into ourselves. Tonight, in just a few moments, we're going to be welcoming in 4 Sifrei Torah from communities that for generations and generations celebrated together, in difficult times rallied together, stood together, prayed together. These Sifrei Torah, if they could talk, could tell us so much about the vibrancy of Jewish life in these communities. Until the Shoah. And as you will hear later, these Sifrei Torah were collected to be in a museum. Hitler was, oh, there used to be Jews, look what they had. We are now the bearers of this responsibility, of this sacred trust, that these Sifrei Torah and these communities and the people who for generations lived and celebrated the words of Torah and lived the words of Torah, mitzvot, that these Sifrei Torah should be in our care to remind us of what precious gift we have been given and our responsibility, as was said, to not only perpetuate their memory, but to live joyously and proudly as Jews wherever we are. I'll ask you to please rise and leave you with the final words before we welcome the Sifrei Torah. There are 300,805 letters in a Sefer Torah. The rabbis teach us that actually it's double that number. It's 600,000 letters in the Torah, corresponding to each neshama, each soul of the Jewish people who received it at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. Because it's not only the black ink of the lettering, but also the scroll around it, the white and the black together that form the letters. If each Sefer Torah represents our people at Sinai, in the moment where we rejoiced in receiving Torah, these Sifrei Torah that we are about to welcome into the community and remind ourselves about represent the millions that were lost in the Shoah, and also the millions that never had the opportunity to be, just because they were Jewish. We welcome in the Sifrei Torah. We'll ask you to remain standing.
Etz chaim hi, lama chazikim ba, v'tomchea meusha deracheh hadarcheno v'chol netivoteh shalom hashivenu Adonai lecha v'nashuva chadesh yameh. You can be seated. Torah has many meanings in Judaism. The Sefer Torah, Torah as learning, that sacred text, the sacred texts that we have held dear to us as Jews throughout the centuries. I share with you a recollection, which I think is very fitting, from one of the foremost scholars of Talmud in the 20th and early 21st century, Professor David Weiss Halivni, a Hungarian Jew who grew up in the same town as Elie Wiesel in Siget, and who survived Nazi concentration camps to come to this country to teach Torah. In his memoir, he describes the degree to which Torah and the physical page of Torah was valued and treasured by Jews in the camps. When the Germans occupied Hungary in the spring of 1944, Halivni was then 15 years old, and he was first taken with the other Jews to the ghetto, later to Auschwitz, and shortly thereafter to Gross Rosen. And while there, he worked for a German company called Ackermann that was constructing underground tunnels to protect the soon-to-be munitions factories from being bombed by the Allies. Halivni's job was to go into the tunnel and take the dull drills from the Italian workers and carry them all the way out the mile to be sharpened and then return them to the tunnels to the Italian workers. It was hard work, dangerous work. And while walking through the tunnels, he had some time and he would review Torah that he had been taught as a child. And guarding the tunnels were German soldiers that were placed there to see that everything in the tunnel was in order. I share with you from his memoir, The Book and the Sword. He writes, "Once I met a particular German who I recognized not really as a German, not a member of the SS, but a member of the Todt, the brigade founded by Fritz Todt, Hitler's chief civil engineer, which was in charge of construction work in Germany. I realized he was not a real German because his German wasn't very good, and he avoided speaking it and used it only to curse and to threaten. Otherwise, he didn't speak much. He was stationed at the crossroads in the tunnels so that he could see what was happening on all sides. I used to see him several times a night. If I went in and out of the tunnel 5 times during an 8 or 10-hour shift, I met him 10 times. And each time I lifted my cap and murmured my greetings, and in the course of time, some sort of relationship developed between us, even though we never talked. Our eyes met, and a kind of body language emerged, and after several months, we knew each other in a peculiar way. We tolerated each other. One night, while I was walking the route, absorbed in my thoughts, with a false sense of security that routine provides, I passed by the Todt as he was eating his scheduled snack, his meal between meals. In characteristic German style, he ate at the same time every night, and what's more, he ate the same thing every night, a thinly sliced sandwich containing some greasy substance that stained the wrapping paper and made it transparent. This time, though, our meeting was different. His sandwich was wrapped in a page of Orach Chaim, a volume of the Shulchan Aruch, the holiest and most authoritative book of Jewish law. Upon seeing this wrapper, I instinctively fell at the feet of the guard without even realizing why. The mere letters propelled me. With tears in my eyes, I implored him, please give me this page. For a while, he didn't know what was happening. He thought I was suffering from an epileptic fit. He immediately put his hand to his revolver, the usual reaction to an unknown situation. But then he understood. This was, I explained to him, a page from a sacred book that I had studied at home. Please, I sobbed, give it to me as a souvenir. He gave me the blot, the page, and I took it back to the camp. And on Sundays we had off. We now not only had a page of written Torah to study, but also what we had memorized. The page became a visible symbol of connection between the camp and the activities of Jews throughout history. The page became a rallying point. We looked forward to studying it whenever we had free time. It was the page, parts of which had to be deciphered because of the grease stains that made the letters illegible, that summoned our attention. And most of those who came to listen didn't understand the subject matter, but that was irrelevant. They all perceived the symbolic significance of this page of Torah. Having the page around in the camp was dangerous. Someone caught with it would be considered to be carrying contraband. One Jewish inmate volunteered to keep it safe, and of course produced it every Sunday when we were off. He must have carried it on his own person. I'm sure he slept with it. The page was always with him insecure. Knowing that the page, the blättel, was with him, we felt secure as well. I'll ask that in the handouts that we read responsibly, Lost World, Memories of Torah. Nobody will ever give us back what we have lost. An entire beautiful Jewish world has ceased to exist. Gone are our fathers and mothers who sustained the fine and pure Jewish life upon their shoulders. The Shabbat stands out in my childhood as an unmitigated joy. The highlight of the weekly Shabbat was attendance at the inspiring synagogue service that included a scholarly sermon derived from the Torah portion of that week. The Torah scrolls inside the Holy Ark were wrapped in mantles made of velvet and silk. These mantles had beautiful designs of holiday scenes embroidered in silver and gold by the women from our community. As a child, I spent many hours daydreaming in the midst of this beauty. I loved Simchat Torah. I loved it that my father would dance holding the Torah scroll, his eyes raised heavenwards. He would dance with his friends and sing. Such a beautiful memory. I have such joy in my heart recollecting this.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jay Needle. Imagine, if you will, 50 Holocaust survivors gathered in one room. As history propels us further from the horrible events of the Holocaust, that image becomes less and less clear. But on November 9th, 2023, 50 Czech Torah scrolls saved from the Nazis were gathered at Road of Sholem Synagogue, Center City, Philadelphia. I was honored to participate, attending with the Torah scroll from Temple Bethel. The Memorial Scrolls Trust, who sponsored the event, held it to remember Kristallnacht, the November pogroms of 1938. 350 of us were in attendance, representing Southern New Jersey, Delaware, and Eastern Pennsylvania. The hallway leading to the sanctuary was set up with tables displaying histories of some of the Torahs, including our Torah from the town of Kolín, Czechoslovakia. Much like this evening, the Torahs were part of a procession through the sanctuary and placed on the bima. Speeches were delivered by clergy and members of the Memorial Scrolls Trust, remembering their history, how we came in possession of them. We danced with them around the sanctuary. There was a small band and a number of cantors sang. The joy and emotion we felt underscored their history and the lengths it took to have them preserved until that day. You may have recognized the date of that program, November 2023. It was mere weeks following the horrors of October 7th that year. It was a tumultuous time. I felt a sense of comfort and obligation to stand not only alongside our scroll, but in solidarity with the broader Jewish community. I feel truly blessed to have participated in this unique event and to have shared our Torah's journey. Our trifold display is here this evening. It's back in the corner, sharing the Torah story and a few pictures from that event. I couldn't take more because I was carrying or dancing with the Torah. As president of Temple Bethel, I have the distinct privilege of presiding at our students' Bar Mitzvah celebrations. In 2024, Sam Ford's Bar Mitzvah coincided with our annual Memorial Shabbat, when we recognize our scroll and its community, Kolín. I'm delighted to introduce Sam, who will share, as they did 2 years ago, the story of our Torah. Sam?
Kolín is a city in Czechoslovakia that had a long Jewish history. It had a Jewish cemetery dating back to 1492. It had a synagogue and a yeshiva too. The Jews of Kolín were murdered in the Holocaust. Starting in 1938, Jewish refugees took shelter in Kolín. In 1940, Jewish shops were confiscated and Jewish women were forced into slave labor at a soap factory. Worst of all, in June 1942, 2,202 Jews were deported from Kolin and other cities. Nearly all of them, including 475 Jews from Kolin, were immediately murdered in Nazi extermination camps. Amazingly, a Torah scroll from Kolin survived. Our synagogue, Temple Bethel, applied to the Memorial Scrolls Trust in London, England, to receive the Kolin Torah as a permanent loan. We do not own it, but we keep it and maintain it. Under the direction of Rance Block, our Torah was repaired and patched to kosher standards. Another feature of our guardianship of the scroll is the cover it wears. It was woven by women in the Bethel community on the loom at Sons of Israel. It represents the security and safety of home that we now provide this Torah. While the parchment itself is too brittle to read from, we bring out this survivor scroll on special occasions like today in Yizkor services to remember the lives that were lost. Furthermore, in June every year, commemorating the deportation of the Kolin Jewish community, we hold a special Shabbat morning service. I'm honored to be asked to present the story of the Kolin Torah. At my mitzvah 2 years ago in June, I was similarly asked to tell the Kolin story. My family has a direct connection to the Holocaust. Peri Roth, my great-grandmother, was a survivor of the Holocaust. She grew up in Czechoslovakia and in April 1944 was sent to Auschwitz with the rest of her family. She and her brothers survived while the rest of her family was murdered. Like the women of Kolin, Peri was forced into slave labor. Thank God she survived the horrors of Auschwitz and in 1945 was liberated by the British. In time, she ended up in the Lehigh Valley and raised a family and was an active member of Temple Bethel. Just as Peri often shared her experiences in the Shoah so that it would always be remembered, this Torah and others like it remain important witnesses reminding us that the Holocaust may never be forgotten.
Congregation Knesset Israel's largest Torah began its journey in Jewish communities in Czechoslovakia, first in Kosovo Hora and later in Sedlčany, where small but devoted Jewish congregations gathered to pray, celebrate, and build Jewish life together. As nearby communities dwindled and their synagogues closed, their Torah scrolls were brought to Sedlčany, preserving not only sacred texts, but also the hopes, memories, and faith of generations. Then came the Holocaust. So much was destroyed: lives, families, entire communities. And yet, this Torah survived, along with 1,563 other Torah scrolls of shattered Jewish communities in Czechoslovakia. They became part of the Czech Memorial Scroll collection in the Central Museum of Prague. The collection was then transferred to the Westminster Synagogue in London in 1964, and the Memorial Scroll Trust was established, where they were cataloged, repaired, and restored. Once repaired, each Torah was given a numbered brass plaque to identify its origin and then sent to fulfill requests of synagogues all over the world. Scroll number 1,354 has been on permanent loan at KI since March 1988, when then members Abraham and Nancy Ross facilitated obtaining the scroll for their son David's bar mitzvah. In 1991, to honor their daughter Deborah's bat mitzvah, artist Elsa Wach was commissioned to create the cover, which we still use today. Its design depicts arms, clothed in prison garb, reaching up in despair. The number 33076 on the arm is Deborah's great-aunt Sarah Jukowski's tattoo number from Auschwitz. The hands are filled with yearning and tension, symbolizing the courage of individuals reaching for God. The Hebrew letters forming the words Am Yisrael Chai also reach up to God, proclaiming that in spite of it all, the people of Israel live. The rosebuds at the top symbolize life, hope, and beauty, affirming that our people will continue to be a light. That is why the story of our Torah is a love story, the story of a people who, even in humanity's darkest moments, held fast to Torah, to memory, to faith, and to one another. It is the story of resilience over destruction, hope over despair, and life over loss. Although flanked by other scrolls in our Ark, this Torah is read frequently at Shabbat and throughout the year. So in this Holocaust Memorial Day, as we remember those who died and honor those who survived, this Torah reminds us of our sacred responsibility, not only to mourn what was lost, but to carry forward what remains, to lift the words of Torah, to teach them, to live them, and in doing so, to ensure that both memory and Jewish life endure. Thank you.
From World War II to the diaspora, the Czech scroll story. A series of miracles allowed a huge horde of Czech Torah scrolls to survive the devastation of the Shoah and stand as a testament to the communities that perished. The Memorial Scrolls Trust is committed to maintaining the legacy of these scrolls by dispersing 1,400 of them around the world on permanent loan from their collection. To those who are entrusted with the scrolls, they are a symbol of hope as well as sorrow, as can be attested by all of us who are part of this community that treasure these Torahs. The hope pushes forward an ongoing mission. The Czech Torah scrolls should be reinstituted in Jewish life as a memorial to the vanished communities which once treasured them. The Memorial Scrolls Trust bears witness to the fulfillment of this hope. Through the trust, let us teach our children about the world of miracles, and let us use the scrolls to remind people about what binds them together every day. Lois Roman is a trustee of the Memorial Scrolls Trust and serves as the United States representative based on the East Coast. The Memorial Scrolls Trust is a London-based nonprofit which oversees the legacy of 1,564 Czech Torah scrolls that survived the Shoah. After a miraculous story of survival, these scrolls arrived in London and were dispersed on permanent loan to caring communities around the world. Lois began her involvement with MST several years ago, following a long career on Wall Street as a money manager. She has an MA in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from the Fish Center at Yeshiva University, has an undergraduate degree from Brandeis University, and an MBA from Columbia Business School. We're very grateful that Lois has made time to help us reflect and commemorate this Yom HaShoah here in our Lehigh Valley community.
Good evening. On behalf of the Memorial Scrolls Trust, I wish to thank everyone at Federation for inviting me to speak today. 2 weeks ago, Jews around the world celebrated the holiday of Passover, commemorating the deliverance of the Jewish people from Egyptian bondage into freedom, an event which happened thousands of years ago. Today, we commemorate Yom HaShoah, the Remembrance Day for the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust at the hands of the Nazis. This occurred only 80 years ago. We have no tangible objects from the exodus of Egypt with which to retell the journey, so instead we wrote the Haggadah to read at our Seders. We use objects in our current world to help us remember. We eat matzah, the bread of affliction, taste the charoset, representing the mortar, dip the bitter herbs in salt water to remember our tears, and of course, clear our sinuses with the horseradish. The Holocaust, however, happened more recently, and we do have objects that we can touch and see that can help us remember. Many of them are in this room today. The Torah scroll is the most revered item in Judaism. Whether we define as Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, or any other style of Jewish, and live in Allentown, New York, or Poland, we all read the same words from these scrolls. It's the glue that binds us all together. It also binds together the major religions of the world. It's the Old Testament for Christianity and the 5 books of Musa, one of the 4 most important teachings for Muslims. It is the ultimate storybook, filled with tales of people who lived thousands of years ago. We reread it each year to learn about them, but also to learn about ourselves. We pass stories and rituals from one generation to another, an example of L'Dor V'Dor, from generation to generation. So too, in these precious MST Czech Torah scrolls, does the Jewish legacy live on and connect European Jewish lives, which were cut short in the 20th century, to us today. I will spend the next few minutes talking about the amazing story of survival of the MST Czech scroll collection and the acts of resistance by a brave Jewish community living during a time of unbridled anti-Semitism. After centuries of being forced to live behind stone walls, made to wear funny hats and other insignia to identify them as a minority, Jewish people in the Central European area of the Czech lands were given the right of citizenship in the mid-19th century. Life blossomed for them, and they spread from cities to more than 300 small towns all over the countryside around Prague and Brno. Although there had always been a traditionally religious group of Jews in this area, by the early 20th century, the majority of the Jews had adopted Reform Judaism from Germany. They spoke German or Czech, not Yiddish. They felt nationalistic pride in their country. They fought in World War I for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They wore fashion styles of the times. They sent their children to secular schools and intermarried with the Czechs and the Germans living in the area. Anti-Semitism was somewhat muted, and Jews held prominent positions in business, education, and politics, much like us sitting here today. After World War I, the country of Czechoslovakia was created from the merger of the Czech lands and the country of Slovakia. In Germany, the Nazi Party was gaining momentum, and the Jewish community in Czechoslovakia was watching with increasing fear. In 1939, the Nazis invaded this area on their way to Poland, thus starting World War II. I'll pause here and not go on and on about World War II or Holocaust history. Instead, I'll tell you the story of how the Judaica survived the Holocaust and frame the story in 4 miracles. Miracle number 1, the collection. Scholars now believe that in an act of Jewish resistance and heroism, the Prague Jews manipulated the Nazis into collecting all of the movable Judaica in the land. More than 200,000 objects were sent to Prague, cataloged at the Jewish Museum, and put away in storage. This coincided with the Jewish deportations to Terezin, the concentration camp outside Prague. From there, the Jews were sent to the death camps. The curators worked feverishly under horrible conditions to save as much as they could before they themselves were sent to the camps. Miracle number 2. Very few bombs fell on Prague during the war. That meant that the Judaica collected survived intact. Unfortunately, Czech jewelry was decimated. with less than 15% of the Jews of this area surviving the Holocaust. In an amazing development, one of the curators of the museum and one of the collectors of the Judaica survived and came back to Prague and was put in charge of the museum archives. By 1948, the communists came to the Czech lands and took over. She convinced them to allow her to move the Torah scrolls from the center of Prague to an abandoned synagogue in the outskirts called the Mikli Synagogue, where they stayed on wooden racks until the 1960s. Miracle number 3. Strapped for cash, the communists were looking for assets to sell. What better moneymaker than a collection of useless religious artifacts? A deal was made between a London art collector, his client, and the government. The scrolls were sold. In 1964, 2 trucks pulled up outside the Westminster Synagogue in Knightsbridge, London. The congregants unloaded the trucks and were eager to see what was inside the 1,564 bags they carried off the trucks. When they began to open the bags, they were shocked. Inside were Torah scrolls, which had been burnt, which had bullet holes and bloodstains on them. We even found notes inside the rolls of the Torah scroll that said, "Please remember us." Miracle number 4. This was a project far greater than one investor or one synagogue. The predecessor of MST began. The trust fixed as many scrolls as possible and sent them around the world on permanent loan to synagogues, schools, museums, and libraries. Currently, 1,400 scrolls are in circulation. Our collection dates from the early 1200s to the early 20th century. All of the scrolls were collected in the Czech lands, and many have special Kabbalistic writing and ornaments in them not found elsewhere or in today's Torah scrolls. All of the scrolls in our collection have this shared legacy, but each has a unique backstory written for a specific Jewish community. Each scroll represents a different town from the Czech lands where the Jewish community was wiped out by the Nazis and ceases to exist to the present day. L'dor v'dor. Today, we have several scrolls from our collection that now live here in the Allentown area, connecting from one generation to another, across decades, across continents, and from darkness into light. On Yom HaShoah, we pause to remember all of the lost Jewish communities that were vibrant and active before the Holocaust. People just like us, with hopes and dreams. They laughed, they fought with their relatives, they complained about high prices, and they complained about the local politicians. In the 21st century, the eyewitnesses and survivors of the Shoah are passing on. Who will teach the Holocaust to future generations? The Holocaust was the largest tragedy of the Jewish people in our lifetimes. We have an obligation to retell the story just like we do with the Exodus story at our Passover Seders. We have an opportunity to use these scrolls, which are silent survivors and witnesses to the Shoah, to teach our future generations. The MST Czech Torah collection underwent a similar experience as the Jews. They were collected, they were numbered, they were cataloged, they were kept in bad conditions, and their health deteriorated. Unlike the Jews, most of the scrolls survived. We can and should use these Torah scrolls for education and commemoration. My greatest wish has been that Holocaust education would become redundant, but sadly, we're living in a time when it is even more necessary. So, I challenge each and every one of you sitting here to become a Holocaust educator in your own little way. Tell the story of this dark time to your descendants, to your friends, so the legacy of those 6 million murdered Jews is never lost, and the events of the Holocaust are never repeated. L'dor v'dor, from generation to generation. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Ron Tico, and I've been asked to speak about Congregation Bris Shalom's Holocaust scroll. And it's hard for me to talk about the scroll without talking about its connection to my family, and which, in the rare case, is about a family that was able to survive. My grandfather was born in Czechoslovakia, lived a very nice life. He and his 12 siblings, actually, he was one of 13. And he and his brother, Baruch, became quite close and went into business together. They had a very successful business. They actually became one of the leading clothing manufacturers in Czechoslovakia at the time, with multiple factories in Prague and in Brno. And my grandfather and his brother in 1939 were arrested by the Gestapo on trumped-up charges. You see, when the Nazis came into the Czech Republic, they thought that the folks who were corporate leaders would purely cause the biggest issues, so they went after those individuals. And so my grandfather and his brother were put in the Spielberg, in the prison there, and unfortunately were transported from there to Dachau. And all at the same time, my grandmother, who maybe she had an intuition and she saw what might be coming, she actually was in Switzerland. And my grandmother and her family, she actually was born in Chicago. And her parents and her family came here to the United States. They did not take to a liking here, so they went back to the Czechoslovakia. And so my grandmother decided that she would go to be with her oldest brother, Julius Klein, in Chicago, to try to reclaim her U.S. citizenship and try to help her husband escape. Now, she, at the same time, had 3 boys. One was actually studying at the time at the University of Illinois in Chicago. The other 2 were still in Brno, and they were placed into hiding there with some uncles and aunts. One of them happened to be my father and his younger brother. So my grandmother came here to the United States, and she met with her oldest brother, who at the time was a brigadier general in the U.S. Army. How fortunate, huh? To have someone like that who knew a lot of folks. He was a top aide to the Secretary of State, and he reached out to an Italian general who he befriended during the World Fair in the early 1900s to see whether he could help release his brother-in-law, Nathan Tico and Baruch Tico, from Dachau. Unfortunately and sadly, my grandfather saw his brother murdered in Dachau by a guard who, as my grandfather would tell the story, didn't like the way that he was looking at him and hit him over the head with the butt of a rifle. And so my great uncle never did survive. My grandmother and her brother, Julius Klein, had reached out to this Italian general, General Tucci, who was working actually in the African front. And he was able, we have this all documented with telegrams and so forth. You know, he said that he would put the release on the docket to free Nathan Tico from Dachau when he was going to Berlin. He was flying to Berlin. Unfortunately, as he was in the plane, he was shot down by German fire, actually, because he was viewed as a sympathizer. There was a number of items on his agenda, apparently, that they did not want to hear from him about. Ultimately, my mother's brother reached out to Benito Mussolini, and it was through Mussolini who the Italians put a lot of pressure on the Germans, saying they were very upset that they had killed one of their top generals, and they honored everything that was on the docket, and my grandfather was pushed out of Dachau and ultimately met up with my grandmother, and my dad and his younger brother somehow at the ages of 13 and 11 hopped on a train and were sent from folks who had them in hiding to meet with my grandmother, and they moved to Chicago. Now, my grandfather of the 13, only 4 survived. The other 3 went to Israel, and so we have a family there in Israel. And of course, you know, we had family in Chicago. Now, why is this so important, and why the Torah scroll? So, my grandfather and his brothers and family, they had a home home in Boskovice. It's a village outside of Brno. And the Torah scroll is from the Great Synagogue in Boskovice. And my grandfather most very likely read out of the Torah scroll. He could lane, and he probably had read from the scroll for his bar mitzvah. My dad took us and our family to visit the synagogue during its restoration. And then on the occasion of my son Nathan Tico's bar mitzvah, he surprised us with the Torah scroll. And he gave it as a contribution to us at Brit Shalom to remember the story and remember the importance of never forgetting. And that was in 2004, and it seems like it was yesterday. And, you know, it survived some fires, and it may not look as pretty as the other ones, but it certainly means the world to me and to the community, and I just want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to share the story.
We turn in our handouts to page 4 as we prepare to light the memorial Yom Hashoah candles, and we read responsively. The human spirit is the light of God. As we look at these lights, try to imagine 6 million candles, each one with the name of another Jewish person. They all were part of the Jewish people. Each one suffered, each one and everyone was murdered. Only by our remembering can they live again in our hearts and minds. I'll be calling up those who are lighting candles one by one. If you'll please come up to the microphone when I call you, and then we'll light over here. Please rise.
I'm lighting this candle on behalf of all of the victims for whose names are not read on a regular basis, that have no descendants to remember them, so we will do that today.
Misha.
I light this candle in memory of my aunt, Lily Wilner, and cousins Margot, Alfred, and Judith Wilner, who were deported from Nuremberg to Jungfernhof concentration camp, which is near Riga, on November 29, 1941. Margot was 9 years old when she was shot on March 26, 1942. Alfred was 6.5 years old and died of typhus in February 1941 in the camp. Judith was 3 years old and shot on March 26, 1942. Lily, their mother, was shot with the children in the Dünnemunde Aktion in the forest near Riga.
Eduardo Eichenwald.
I light this candle in memory of my grandfather, Samuel Metzger, who served as a cantor in a synagogue in Germany. I also honor the righteous Gentile who risked his life to rescue a Torah from the burning synagogue during Kristallnacht, now known by historians as the November pogrom, and safeguard the Torah until he could return it to my grandfather after his release from the Dachau concentration camp. With great courage, my grandfather smuggled its Torah out of Nazi Germany and brought it to Colombia. In 1954, I had the profound privilege of reading from this very Torah on my birthday of my bar mitzvah.
Michael Hortner.
I light this candle in memory of my grandparents, Michael Hortner and Ella Hortner, who were shot and murdered in Vienna, and also my mother's brothers, 3 of them at least, were killed in Auschwitz.
Tama Tamarkin.
I light this candle in memory of my grandparents, Judith and Matka Ginsburg, who not only survived, but also resisted as partisan fighters. I also light this candle in memory of the Jews of Lida, Poland. Lida was the town where my bubby was from. On May 8th, 1942, was the first liquidation of the Lida ghetto. And on that day, 5,500 Jews of Lida and 57 members of my family were killed, including my bubby's sister, Tema Koszczanska, who I am named for.
It's always my profound privilege to invite for the 6th candle grandchildren, great-grandchildren to come and light. We remain standing for a moment of silence. You may be seated.
I am honored to share the story of the Memorial Scroll Torah number 1120, or MST number 1120. Sure. Which the Jewish Day School is blessed to hold sacred and which keeps our students in awe and awareness of our Jewish past, present, and future. Before the war, the Torah was located in the Prerov Synagogue in the Czech Republic. In 1942, after the Prerov community was sent to the Terezin ghetto, the Torah began its journey, like the others, through decades in warehouses, including the one in Prague, and eventually to London, when they were placed under the care of the Memorial Scrolls Trust for restoration and global distribution. Like many of these Torahs, MTS number 1120 was in poor condition, but it was analyzed by scribes, repaired, and dedicated for use in commemorative occasions and for memorial purposes. Our treasured MTS number 1120 was given to Albert L. Pollack, then the vice president of the Gershom Y in Philadelphia, where it remained for 30 years. As the Gershom Y was closing, the Torah needed a new home. We too were blessed by the Tico family, who made a monumentally generous donation to the Memorial Scrolls Trust, along with Eduardo and Jeanette Eichenwald, Larry and Eva Levitt, Robert Hartman, Kathleen Cesari, and Phyllis Fleisch. These donations made it possible for the organization to lend MTS number 1120 to the Jewish Day School of the Lehigh Valley. The Holocaust Torah at the JDS was entrusted to us on November 28, 2018, and rededicated on March 12, 2019, in a ceremony facilitated by Amy Golding and our staff and faculty. MTS 1120 is displayed proudly in our front lobby in a special case built just for this purpose. The Torah acts as both a sobering reminder of a past that cannot be repeated, as well as an inspiration to follow in the footsteps of the heroes who came before us. It is a daily testament to the spirit of survival, renewal, and hope. We thank the Memorial Scrolls Trust for their trust in the JDS.
Ask that everyone please rise as we recite the Kilmale Memorial Prayer. Those who are carrying the Sifrei Torah will come forward. I'll first recite the prayer in Hebrew, and then together from the packet we'll recite it together in English. Just as the Sifrei Torah are coming forward, I wanted to recognize, commend, and echo the words of my colleagues who spoke before me. It's a powerful thing. The Torah has been what has sustained the Jewish people, whether we find ourselves in the east, in the west, in the north, or the south. That's what has sustained us throughout the ages. And it's meaningful that we could have these here with us. El malei rachamim shochem b'amromim Hamsei menucha nechona al kanfei hashchina b'malos kedoshim utorim k'zorak yamaserim es nishmos hakedoshim v'atorim shumsu v'shenehergu v'shenishchatu v'shenisrafu v'shenitba'u v'shenechnaku al kiddush Hashem Aidei Hatzorim HaGermanim Yamach Shemam V'Zichram Bavur Shanachnu Mispalim Baraskaretz Nishmosehem B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchasam Lachem barachamim yastirem b'seser kanafav lolamim. V'yitzror b'tzrachim es nishmosehem. Adonai hu nachalasam. V'yanuchu b'shalom mishkavosehem. V'nomar amen. We recite together in English. Exalted, compassionate God, full of mercy who dwells on high, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to souls of 6 million of our people, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered and burned, to the righteous among the nations, to the millions who died defending the right to be different at a time of madness and terror. Therefore, may the merciful one shelter them in the shelter of your wings. May their memory endure, inspiring truth and loyalty in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May their rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Please remain standing for Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divara kirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalav v'izman karib v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mebarach le'olam lalmei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shmeid, kudsha, brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'brama, oseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Once the scrolls are replaced, you may be seated.
I'd like to invite our teen participants to come and lead us in the final reading unto every person, which you can find on page 6 of your handout.
Unto every person there is a name bestowed on him by God and given to him by his parents.
Unto every person there's a name conferred by the mountains and the walls which surround him.
Unto every person there is a name assigned him by his failings or contributed by his yearnings.
Unto every person there is a name derived from his celebrations and his occupation.
Unto every person there is a name which he receives from the sea and is given to him by his death.
Tonight, we have welcomed Torah into our midst. Torah, we are taught, can mean many things. The words and teachings from Sinai, the parchment that we recognize tonight, upon which the words are written, the words that are written but which can never be erased as long as they are inscribed in our hearts. And when they are within us, each of us becomes a Torah. As long as you are attentive to the histories of the Shoah, pledge to remember a story, a community, a name, you become a vessel for the memories, obligated to share the stories. Your outreach to others, sharing the Shoah with others, makes you part of the legacy. These Torahs may seem as if they're silent witnesses, but as we have seen tonight, they too have stories to tell. These scrolls, made of wood and parchment, forged in fire, saved by dedication, rely on us to speak for them and the communities they represent, and to promise never to forget. Please rise for the Hatikvah, and after the Hatikvah, please remain standing as we recess the Torahs through the sanctuary.